if you destroy the coral reefs, if the coral reefs die, every time a part of the coral reef or a species within the coral habitat dies, we lose perhaps the cure to cancer.
I'm here this afternoon with Peter Neill, the director of the World Ocean Observatory. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's a great honor to be here, Rob. Thanks.
Well, why did you write this? What compelled you to make a statement now?
It came to me in a used bookstore in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I got in out of the sleet. And I found a book in the dollar bin called The Ocean, Our Future by Mario Soares, who was had been the president of Portugal. He was the first democratically elected president after Salazar. And he, in 1998, had convened an independent commission on the future of the ocean. And they produced what is called The Ocean, Our Future. And it is still, to my mind, the most prescient plan for the future of the ocean. And at the very end, a kind of penultimate recommendation at the end was that there be a web-based place of exchange of information and educational services about the ocean, defined as an integrated global social system, and that would transcend the conventional focus of environmentalists on species and habitat, and would relate to the ocean to all of these other things that matter: climate, freshwater, food, energy, health, security, trade, transportation, science, technology, cultural traditions, are only linked by one system on Earth, which is the ocean as an integrated global social system that unites all of those things. Every one of the sustainability goals conforms and is engaged and encompassed by the ocean system. Mm-hmm. I carry with me usually, do I have one today? I hope so, a blue marble. This is Earth from space. And it's called Terra, but it's wrong. It should be called Aqua. 70% of the Earth is covered by water. And it is the one thing that each and every person on Earth needs in exactly the same amount to survive, whether you're an individual, a family, a community, a nation state, a planet. If we run out of water, we cannot survive. And so it becomes an interesting paradigm around which to consider how you might look at a solution for the 21st century. I see a world where the paradigm was essentially unlimited growth in the name of consumption, enabled by fossil fuels. And there's not a person on Earth who didn't benefit in some way by that paradigm. There's no question about it. In and of itself, it was not bad. But
I was going to say, it's like the guy that jumped off the Empire State Building. You open the window and you say, "How you doing?" He says, "Fine so far."
So far, exactly. So somewhere along the way, we passed that point of really, truly no return, just as if we'd left port and we're going out into the great unknown on the ocean. There's a point where you can't go back. And at that point, the negatives of the old paradigm overwhelmed its benefits.
Coupled with population growth.
Totally.
Which was a product
and
of
a comparable parallel problem.
Yeah.
So those two things together basically created a system that is fundamentally bankrupt. It does not work.
Tell me, let's take a bit of an inventory. Where do you see the damage most vividly from your investigation?
Well, if you just take the most obvious situation, if you look at the water column and you look at and you realize that that represents a hierarchy of feeding, providing, nurturing, and if it is poisoned in any way, shape, or form, we ultimately will bear the negativity of that. So, for example, if you destroy the coral reefs, if the coral reefs die, every time a part of the coral reef or a species within the coral habitat dies, we lose perhaps the cure to cancer. An enormous number of drugs in clinical trials are based on ocean species, on essentially the synthesis of maritime systems, of oceanic systems, marine biological systems. It's not just tourism. Tourism is a big industry, we understand that. But what you're sitting there is you're looking at the incubator for future cures and benefits for human health. And you can run right up the train. You can pollute the algae. You can have algae blooms. You can poison the animals that feed on the algae. You can essentially destroy the supply of phytoplankton. And all of there's a kind of downward spiral of negativity. And that's just in a place, by the way, that none of us can see. It's a place apart. And in the public perception, infinitely curable. The ocean will cure itself. Oh, don't worry about whatever we put into it. It'll dilute enormously and nothing will happen. So I see the ocean defined as a system of circle and cycle of conveyance that starts at the mountaintop and descends to the abyssal plain, backs up through the water cycle, which every one of us knows from science. It's really interesting. One of the few scientific principles that everybody kind of remembers is the water cycle. And we kind of get it, but we get it only in concept of the third grade or sixth grade teacher who put it up on the blackboard or showed us it in the book. We don't really understand that that system is still alive and well, and that hydraulic connection is at the essence of what I would call the new paradigm. And we have examples all over the world. We were fighting water wars, Flint, Michigan. One 5-minute consideration based on an ideological principle changes the location of water supply from one place to another for a medium-sized city in Michigan. And that city, in that unthinking moment, is destroyed. Every aspect of that city was destroyed. Real estate values are gone. Done. No jobs. Who's going to move to Flint? Who's going to invest in Flint, right? What about the children?
Oh, dreadful.
What about the families? I mean, the social consequences of that ridiculous system that was based on some minute political sense of political advantage, or maybe the saving of a few $100,000, wreaked social havoc.
And we see analogs to Flint emerging now all over the country and all over the world.
All over the world. Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Yes.
I mean, a city that has no fresh water. You have a whole circumstance of, you have clear cutting, you have climate change, you have extreme weather, you have maximum erosion, you have essentially indifference to maintenance of a primitive water distribution system at best. You have political corruption. You add it all up together, and now you have a city of 12 million people that has to have tanked water come in and distribute it as if it was the most distant, drought-ridden place on earth.
So you've gone to a place where you were inspired by Suarez. You saw an opportunity to use this new technology and sound the alarm in a way that the world can access, understand, be inspired by. Then you've written this book, and inside this book, in addition to cataloging the dangers and the damage, you start to talk about the human system. The human system of governance, dysfunctional governance, lack thereof, old economics, new economics, moral pollution. These are all subject headings in your table of contents. We're going to get to how do we get out of this mess. But how would you characterize the moral pollution and the contrast between the old and the new economics?
Well, I think the universal thing at work, the things universally at work are basically vested interests and fear of change. So we have in Roman law, English common law, in American law, what's called the public trust doctrine. Public trust doctrine says that natural resources are owned by the people of the nation. They're owned by all of us, right? And it is we have the ability to delegate or license someone to manage that for the benefit of ensuing generations. So let's just take oil and gas. What did we do? We licensed it. There has been no consideration of future generations. The idea was to drill until there was no more, and if we thought we were going to run out, we created a technology with unforeseen or even possibly foreseen negative side benefits, fracking. In order to prolong it, we essentially protected and subsidized, and at the taxpayer's cost, private corporations to go out and exploit that in such a way that in the end it represents what, you tell me, may be the most extraordinary transfer of value ever achieved by humankind, where you take all the money, all the value represented in the energy capacity of just the United States, just take the United States, subsidize it, tax it minimally, and then allow profits to be accumulated that are reinvested in, not necessarily in mitigating the advantages that have been given, those advantages continue, and distributing the profits from millions of people to a few 100,000 shareholders. So suddenly all this value is lifted up, it runs through the system, goes through the pump, and where does it end up? It ends up in the portfolios of the stockholders, of the shareholders of the major energy corporations. And you can extrapolate that now to a world resource. And that's exactly what has happened.
And is an analogous thing happening in the realm of water?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, almost invisibly. It's more now than it's ever been before. But in the book, I actually quote from a Merrill Lynch report, internal report distributed to investors about the impetus for the commodification of water, that water is a commodity. I never use that word because that's the problem. When you begin to commodify water, the same way that you commodify oil or gas or minerals, you essentially are just perpetuating the same rationale, the same mode of behavior on the thing that actually we can't run out of. We can run out of oil and we have the sun. We can run out of gas, we have the wind. But we can't run out of water because we can't make it from anything else. We can desalinate it, which we will inevitably have to do. There's no question that the volume of fresh water that exists today, 3% of the water on Earth is fresh. Of the 2% is locked in the poles, or at least has been until recently, right? Okay, so that means that that the entire world population is existing on 1% of the total volume of water on Earth. Well, we're going to run out of water if we go from 7 to 9 to 11 to 13 to 15 billion people on Earth. We will just run out of it. It's just going to be gone, and we see that already.
We got to turn the corner here.
Fine.
How do we turn the corner? I'm not talking about in this interview, I'm talking as a society. How do we turn the corner? How does this human construction called governance and commerce and economic system be recast, reshaped, so that my grandchildren have plenty of water to drink?
Well, I get this question all the time, and I think about it too. And who am I to answer it, for example? But I've thought about it a bit. So I look at it in terms of value. How do we calculate value? That's number one. 2, how do we structure the calculation of value? And 3, having done 1 and 2, how do we behave as agents of the system, right? So if you take value and you think about it in terms of hydraulic society, and by the way, this is just an idea. They may be better ideas, but let me hear them, please.
No, because stimulate the conversation.
We need one. But so if you take the idea of hydraulic society and you realize that water is the central organizing resource, then you suddenly realize that in order to protect it and sustain it, certain things like have to happen. So the World Water Manifesto, where everybody gets it in equal amounts for a basic survival, makes a kind of sense, and you can do that. Then you can say you can price water, right? You can start to price water in a different way in terms of the actuality of its true value. So if I go down the aisles of a supermarket, I hear a torrent, a raging waterfall of externalities, of water that has been used in every part of the processing of all those products on all those shelves that's not in the price. Takes million gallons of water to build a Volkswagen car. Makes 150 gallons of water to pull a cappuccino. You know, how much water does it take to put food, industrial food, on our table? How much water does it take to put organic and artisanal farmed food on our table? How much does it cost in the packaging, in the plastics? All of the things that we take for granted as part and parcel of how we behave, right, is priced accordingly, but it's a false index. In Los Angeles, the total water volume billed, something like 20%. This maybe take a little hyperbole here, but it's a very high percentage, is actually billed to 4 homes. Think about it. How many people drinking water in Los Angeles, which is in a water crisis area, now, you know, only recently declassified as a drought area, and you have 4 families accounting for 20% of the total consumption of water within the district. It's unconscionable, and they're not paying anything more than the guy down here who's getting, you know, his daily quota. So the whole pricing of it would logically change. It would logically change.
Well, you talk about, at one level, water is a human right. If you don't have water, you're not a human. At another level, water is a commodity that, how do I say, that need for water, that there's no choice if you're going to continue alive, means you have what's called a very inelastic demand, meaning you're not price sensitive because you expire without it.
Without it.
That creates a context for exploitation. That you were describing.
Right. It also creates a context for political justification for the opposite.
Let's talk about the economics profession and guiding lights. As you've made this book, as you've continued your World Ocean Observatory, are there some guiding lights that you've seen grappling with the political economic question?
What they end up talking about a lot is not just pricing. They talk about structure. Right? There's this whole thing about structure, and there are these new ways of structuring how we organize ourselves that are something to think about. So the old corporate citizen way, that's one way. At the other end of the spectrum, for example, you might have a completely socialist situation where the nation basically controls all the water and distributes it according to needs, utility and needs. I believe there was an older economist in the 19th century, in Marx and Engels, who sort of talked about that very thing. There's a wonderful book called Socialism. What is it? It's called Socialism in the Environment or something like that. And it reads along, and it quotes amply from Marx and Engels, who were pretty good conservationists, actually, it seems, as I read it. They had all these ideas that were really about sort of the egalitarian sharing of natural resources and stuff like that. It didn't work out in certain ways when the USSR tried to centralize control of all those things. There were some problems. Okay, fine. Didn't work that particular way. But the underlying rationale or analysis doesn't necessarily change. But the system of implementation was flawed. So how do we look? What are the new ways to do that? Well, you could start looking at not just having independent corporations that control everything, but you could have localization, for example. You could have the idea that local communities not nation states, but local communities end up essentially owning or managing. They don't own it, but they're managing it for the benefit of the localities. That's one way of doing it. You could also have lots of work being done on social benefit corporations and impact bonds and things like that, where you have corporations that say, fine, we're going to exploit these things in many ways, but in fact, we're not necessarily going to make the payout to the shareholders, because now the shareholders are the citizens. So we're going to pay out in forms of some kind of social benefit. And also, there's also the sacred aspects of water. If you look in every religion, there is a sacred part to water. Jews go to the water for purification. We baptize with water.
C.G. Jung thought the water was representative of the unconscious.
Unconscious, right? Yeah. So almost everywhere you look, water has this sort of sacred meaning, and there's a kind of deep, shared psychological connection based on the universality and its profound, deep value for sustaining and healing the soul.
Well, Peter, I would say it has been great to wade into the water with you today and to explore this. I think you do a tremendous social service by picking up from Suarez, building the World Ocean Observatory, writing this book, and challenging us all to think more. And it's obvious to me, as I talk with you, that the economics profession has not adequately embraced this profound challenge, and thank you for the impetus to doing so.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.